Well, I don't think Garcia or I consider ourselves great business minds, and that's why we tend to defer to people who know and understand these things a lot more. And I know different people in the world of high finance and business and the stock market who are expert might come to different conclusions. There's sometimes great disagreement on that. But the individuals who study this stuff longer than we have, understand it better than we have a much better chance than we do to convey anything like a thread of logic. So to that end, Gargi said, what about Najarian? We haven't had him on in a while. And so Pete Najarian, kind enough to join us via the Connecticut Water Systems Hotline, co-founder of Market Rebellion. Oh, you got him. He joins us now. Pete, how have you been, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, Dan. Love listening to you guys. I'm down here. I think Louis is probably not too far away from where I am right now.
It's like a colony. Do you guys have like your own little colony down there?
Oh, sure. It's an all Minnesota colony, man. I mean, you get on the West Coast, it's all Minnesotans.
That's
everybody else on the East Coast, they're all New Yorkers.
Yeah.
So that's just the way Florida is.
That also includes Mace, Glen Mason as well. I mean, the famous.
Oh, that's right.
The famous condo story, as I recall it, was Mace was looking for a place down there. Lou Nanny located a spot and said, "Hey, I got something for you." And Mace basically took it without seeing it on the basis of Luigi's recommendation, and I think he still got the place.
Well, it just shows you Luigi's got some great taste, man.
He does. Yeah, there's no question about that. All right, where do we begin on this thing? It's overwhelming to a lot of us. So the rally, let's start with the rally that took place yesterday.
Sure.
People want to believe all is well again. The numbers were certainly dramatic. Is all well again? Are we back to where we were before all this stuff started, or is it a bit more complicated and complex than that?
It's probably more complicated than that, but I will tell you yesterday what really snapped the markets that were getting crushed once again, and this has been really an ugly week, Dan. I mean, if you go all the way back to even last week, it's been really, really rough because the markets have just been slapped around left and right and always to the downside, except for yesterday with that big turn. And the big turn really happened because the fact that the president came out and he said, look, I'm willing to pause this for 90 days. So basically 3 months, right? And the idea behind that was, look, there are enough countries that are allegedly reaching out, 50, 60, 70, 80. The number never really stays very stagnant at any rate or whatever. But whatever the number is, I do believe it probably is a pretty strong number that want to come to the table, that want to negotiate. And I think that's what exactly the president was looking for. The problem is, it will take time. This doesn't just literally happen overnight. And so I think that part of it is where today people came back to reality and said, wait a minute, we think that this is going to continue to escalate to some degree, and the negotiation process is going to take some time. And that's kind of the rationale behind why the sellers just came back, because they were hoping that this could go in a very fast, unbelievable sort of a way. It's not going to happen like that. I think unless the president were to really do some extreme work with this, and I don't think that they really want to do that. I think that they really want to get what they really want, and that's going to take some time to get that done if they're going to do the negotiations on the right side for the U.S.
All right. Maybe you can answer the question of what you think they really want here, because I've heard some people say, look, I'm actually with him on China. I think there has to be a significant recalibration here and a reckoning, so to speak. But I'm not getting why we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater with a lot of other countries where the numbers don't even make sense, the allegations don't even make sense. Where are you on that whole issue?
I think that was one of the biggest problems I had with this whole thing. I don't mind the idea of trying to do something about all these tariffs that have been put on the United States. And this goes all the way back to World War II, to be honest with you. It was a way to try to get countries back up on their feet after the war. That's how long this goes back. Now, the fact that folks are still doing that is pretty ridiculous, because we're talking about quite a few years since World War II, right? But it's still been in existence since that time with these tariffs. I think the problem is that the president decided, I'm going to go after everybody. And he went after the 103 countries or whatever 183 countries, whatever the real number is. It's just an amazing thing that he said he would go big. He did go big. And I think that's the partial mistake. I think that If he would have just attacked those that really put the highest tariffs on the United States, I think that would have been something that people probably could have digested, and we'd probably not have been sold off as hard as we have been this week, and particularly the reselling today. I think that's really all that kind of plays into this. He didn't need to go so big. He chose to go big because he said that he was going to do that. And that's kind of what we're dealing with here. And by the way, I agree with the idea of getting rid of these tariffs. It's just a matter of how do you actually execute that the right way to get it done the right way, and let's get ourselves back on our feet. I mean, we've been sitting here for the last 70 plus years waiting for something to happen there. We're finally going to get something, but I don't know that you had to take off this big of a bite right out of the gate.
I'm looking at a headline in the Wall Street Journal today. I want to get your reaction to the premise of this story. The headline is, Trump's trade math ignores a major export, American services. Let me read the first couple sentences of the piece. President Trump is wielding tariffs to try to close the massive U.S. trade deficit in goods, which he sees as a sign of economic weakness. It is only part of the trade story. While the U.S. buys more goods from abroad than it sells, the opposite is true for services, which include everything from streaming subscriptions to financial advice. Trump left these service exports out of his tariff math, but they are being pulled into his trade wars. Do you agree with that premise?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, unfortunately, the president's a very interesting guy. I'm not going to take one side or the other on this whole thing. I always try to stay somewhere in the middle. But I think that the aggressiveness of how we've approached this is probably part of the problem. I think it's something that could have been done completely differently than it was to be able to get to where we wanted to be. And I think by being as aggressive as we've been, I think that's become a major problem. And that's really, you talk about something like that. How about when I tell you they have 80,000 movie screens in China, and now the film imports are reduced by China. So in other words, those films that we get our extra money as we go around the rest of the world, it's not going to really happen as much as it had been, at least in China. And that's another problem that we have to face in terms of all those different movie studios out there in Hollywood and so forth. That's just one more thing. And you talk about services and something like that. That's exactly directly where I would go. And it's really too bad, Dan, because I think that he's got the right idea. He's just going too big too fast, and I think that's the problem.
It's the old, I'm going to use a ball-peen hammer rather than a surgical knife, unfortunately. And we're seeing the results on a number of fronts in that regard. So tell me, so yesterday we had this huge rally. Today, the sell-off is renewed. Dow closing down more than 1,000 points. NASDAQ sheds 4%. So is this about the idea that the China part of this, the China trade war, is sinking in? Why did the markets respond so differently today than they did a day ago?
Yeah, I think that the problem is partially directly at China itself, but I think that folks are really starting to actually take this in and digest the idea that this doesn't happen overnight. And it's one of the things that I've said. I've been doing a lot of different shows and TV things and so forth, and I think that the reality is anybody that thought this was going to happen just an overnight sort of a deal, that was an overnight dream. There's no way. It's really more of a nightmare because this is going to extend out in time. And I think that was the reality that hit today. People started really giving this a lot more thought. We started off not so bad at the beginning of the day, and then it just sort of cascaded down for the rest of the day. So the sellers came in, and the folks, it just a huge ball rolling down a hill, unfortunately, Dan, because the biggest sellers is not mom and pops. It's not you. It's not Justin. It's not me. These are these big major funds that really reel some huge numbers that have put this into the market because they're starting to see it going to the wrong way, and so they want to be in front of that. Well, they're pushing it down even faster than it probably should be because that's another overreaction, I think, by many of these hedge funds.
Financial big knocker Pete Najarian joining us on the Fan. We're going to have a 520 Sports Fix coming up. Dr. Dan's inbox will be open before we are done as well. So what is your best advice to people who have seen, obviously, their 401ks take a significant hit? Maybe it was some rally yesterday, but a significant hit overall. What's the average rube supposed to do that has followed the advice of folks like you over the years about, holding on this money, putting in another account, the whole bit to set yourself up for later?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in a lot of the things that Warren Buffett stands for as well, and I give him a lot of the credit for being one of the greatest investors I've ever seen. And that is not getting emotional about it. You don't sell when things are going down. You sell when things are going up, and you buy when things are going down. You buy when there's blood in the streets. It doesn't mean that you start buying now. I think that there's going to be plenty of time to be able to find further lows before we actually start to turn on that. But just to give you a small example, Dan, a lot of people were giving Warren Buffett a lot of flack about his Apple position. He didn't get into it till 2016. He finally decided to buy a technology company. He bought Apple. Great decision to do that. And then people said, well, why is he selling? He was selling in 2024. Why was he selling last year? Well, because he felt like it had sort of topped out. Well, lo and behold, after everybody said that he was doing all things wrong, suddenly it's right back again, significantly off of where it was. He put $679 billion in his pocket, and he might start going back into Apple and maybe getting some more of that. And that's the type of thing that I do for my living, is trying to find out where the biggest money in the markets is starting to move and shift towards. And if I start to see anything close to what looks like to be Warren Buffett back in Apple or back in some of those types of names, I absolutely will react. But we are not at that point yet.
Do you remember Ross Perot?
Yeah, very well.
Okay, good, because I didn't want to hit you blind. I figured you probably did, because a texter asks this question via 612. Is Trump basically doing what Perot pitched in 1992? Do you remember what he was pitching? I remember him. I remember him being a maverick. I'm not sure I remember precisely what he was pitching.
No, and I'm there, right there with you. That I was still playing football back then, thank goodness. I wasn't in the financial world at that point in time, but I remember him. I remember him running for president, but I don't really remember a lot of the different thoughts that he had. But this is something I don't think he's doing the wrong thing. I think the approach is the wrong way, and what I mean by that is, Of course, that we should reduce or eliminate these tariffs because they're ridiculous and they don't really need to be there anymore. I mean, we're a long ways from World War II. So at some point, that should be addressed. I think the problem is, why would you go after all of them at once? And I think that's the big problem. When we all saw him on TV holding up that huge cardboard cutout, I think that sort of explained it all. Why would we go that big? I don't think you have to go that big. And I think, unfortunately, that's one of the negatives, I think, about President Trump is he goes big or he goes home. And in this case, he went big. He's going to need to go home.
Why yesterday do you everybody's got a theory on why he blinked. Some are talking about stocks. Somebody said, well, actually the bond market got to his attention. There's a number of stories indicating, frankly, that his Treasury secretary helped to persuade him to sort of slow down a little bit. What's your best educated thought on that?
Yeah, I think Bessett's done a great job of trying. It doesn't mean it always executes, but of trying to hold the president back from some of the very knee-jerk reactions that sometimes do seem to happen. And I say that as a guy who's not against the president or anything. I just look at this and think the way he's approached it, unfortunately, is going to be a problem when it comes to inflation. It is going to be a problem when it comes to slowing growth. And those are things that I think a lot of the American public is really looking at each and every day, and they're trying to figure that out because inflation has become this big word. Now, so far, so good in terms of inflation. It's been coming down. We're going to get another number tomorrow, the PPI number. That's going to show us probably that inflation has come down even a little bit more. But the problem is employment, and are we going in the right direction right now with the economy? And I think this is going to put a bit of a bump in the road in terms of the economy.
Let's move in the final minutes here to the toy department, which I know is still, after all these years, near and dear to your heart, even though you're further removed from it than you obviously once were back in the day. There's an ongoing debate that's broken out. It may now be moot because of some comments that we've gotten from the athletic director and the University of Minnesota. But an ongoing debate about, in the wake of the decision to dismiss the men's basketball coach, bring in a new one, on the viability at this point at a clearly historic, highly revered arena called Williams Arena. So, I have been somewhat agnostic on this issue. Guardsy's been militant. He's brought me to a place where I'm more in his corner. I don't want to go too far because I don't want that to be the excuse, because I don't think it's the reason that the program is struggling. But I do think it's reached a point where we're being unrealistic to think that the consumer of today cares all that much about what that history represents. They want a more usable, user-friendly, bells and whistles arena. Can be a smaller one, by the way, but one that has all of the things that we associate with consumers in 2025. Doesn't seem like the U's going that way because I don't think they have the money to do it at this point. But what's your view on that whole issue in general?
Well, there's no doubt when you look at what was built for the football program, how that is in terms of the recruiting. I think that does open up a lot of doors, and the kids need that. They want that. That's what they've seen when they've gone to all the other universities around the country that they get recruited by. Is Williams Arena old? Sure it is. I don't want to just blame it on the arena itself, though, Dan. I still love it. Maybe it's because I'm becoming older and I just remember all the great memories of watching some great teams play at the University of Minnesota at that beautiful spot that we've got there and the elevated floor and all that goes into that. I'm a big believer in that, but I don't think that that's really the way the 17 and 18-year-olds are looking at it. I think the 17 and 18-year-olds, they want the biggest, the baddest, and everything that they can possibly get. They want all the different sweatshirts and different shoes and everything that they can possibly get from the university. So it's a bit of a different world. I would say that we need to do that. Do we have the money to do it? Probably not. And quite frankly, I still feel bad for Ben because even though I know he had very little success with the University of Minnesota, I think he was actually fighting with at least one, maybe both hands behind his back when you really look at this NIL money that he was dealing with versus most of the competition. And all the players that we lost last year because of the fact that we didn't have that kind of money for him. So if this new coach doesn't get any of that NIL money, anything close, if it's not multiples of what Ben was getting, he's going to show you exactly the same type of a team, I think, on the court, because you can only show so much if you don't have the talent out there. And I think that was the biggest problem this past year. I was critical of Ben myself about all the losses and the fact that we were at the bottom tier of the Big Ten in basketball for 3 straight years. But when you tie his hands behind his back, I don't know that that's a fair comparison. I would love to have seen them figure out a way to have the NIL money that they could at a bigger level, at least, to show what the Golden Gophers really could do, because I think they had some very talented guys. Unfortunately, they ended up at other universities.
How much sway do you still have at the University of Minnesota?
Well, Garcia and I have talked a little bit about this here and there. I've got some. I'm really excited about a lot of things. I think they've done some things that I'd love to be a guy who could help them out with a lot of this stuff. And, everybody has these general managers at the University of California, Berkeley. It's Ron Rivera. He's a good friend of mine. He was my brother Paul's roommate when they were both outside linebackers at Cal Berkeley.
I did not realize they were roommates. Interesting.
It's been great.
That's a great idea. So are you are you being the aggressor in that regard, or are you trying to make that to convey that?
They can't
position?
afford you. It's just another job Najarian wants that they can't afford. They can't afford Najarian.
That could be the problem.
Well, I'll tell you guys this. That is the one job that I would probably give up for what I do presently, which I do love doing. I love the stock market. Yeah. It's really fun. It's challenging. It's competitive, but the sports side of it, and I recently have actually been approached by somebody at the NFL level for something that potentially I would consider. But, right now I'm not going to make those kind of moves. I do love the University of Minnesota, and I think there are things that I could do for the university that would probably help, I think, in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to raising money. And
let's face it, Pete, you don't need any more money. I mean, you're fine for your kids, grandkids, great. I mean, you're fine for like the next 500 years, right? I mean, come on, how much more money can you get?
I wish I had the money that everybody seems to think that I have.
Well, you know what?
I'm just a kid from Minneapolis Central, man. That's all I am, Dan.
When I brought it up, I was asking just for a more modest approach regarding one particular issue. We today cold called Glenn Mason because we missed his 75th birthday. He was 75 yesterday. And he brought up what he brings up literally every week he's on the air with me, and that is that when he was fired by the University of Minnesota, Joel Maturi, he had a little TV. This was the days before the big flat screen plasmas.
The Goal Line Club, Pete, gave him a TV.
Like an 8-inch diagonal TV in his office that he claims they never delivered to him. So I thought maybe you start there with your influence to find that damn TV so that on this show, when he joins us again in the fall, we can have a big ceremony to present him the TV that he alleges Joel Maturi never delivered.
Well, I can tell you this. I'll try to work with the guys over at Best Buy because I know the CEO. I know some of those people. Maybe we can get them a screen now.
There you go. That might even be better. Outstanding. Great to catch up, my friend. We'll try to do more of that. And again, thank you.